Lisa Schnebly Heidinger is celebrating Arizona with lots of interesting people, so you'll hear wonderful voices with new stories. Grab your favorite drink and settle in. We're celebrating Arizona, going everywhere from A to Z, and we're off.
Welcome to Celebrating Arizona. We have a wonderful guest today, Dawn Wallace, who I met probably 15 years ago or close to it, because you are still, as far as I'm concerned, the face of Flynn Brown. But that's not your job title, and you've probably done a lot of things between those two.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Lisa. It's, as you know, I do one for Flynn Brown, and it's a little bit more. I'm more nervous being on this side of it, so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about program, but also just my own civic leadership journey. So I actually did not start my professional career in public service. I was in the private sector. But my late 20s, I decided that I wanted to make a bit of a career change. And I threw a want ad in the newspaper. Some of the youngins don't know what that is, but they used to have job postings in the Sunday paper. I was hired by Governor Hull's administration to work in her budget office. Okay. And from there, I served her until she finished her term. And then I worked for Governor Napolitano. And then I worked for the legislature, both in the Senate and the House. And I took a 13-month journey into the education system. And then I came back to work for the governor's office for Governor Ducey. So I'm very proud to say that I've worked for 3 governors of 2 different parties, 2 speakers of the House, and 2 presidents of the Senate. I've never worked in the judiciary, but I'm hoping to do that before I can migrate. Well, I mean, it's a trifecta, right?
Yeah, just to round it out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, back up even before that. Where did you come up? Where were you raised?
Oh, okay. Well, I was born in Tehran, Iran.
Wow.
My parents decided to come to the United States primarily to complete my father's education. He was an engineer and wanted to get some advanced education in the United States. It's very common for young people in the 70s. They would come study and then go back to their countries of origin and live their lives. And so my father, my mother, and I traveled here. I was, I think, almost 5 years old, and it was 1975. And we landed, I call Gainesville, Florida, our Plymouth Rock. Oh. That's where we settled. My father went to the University of Florida at Gainesville. We traveled a little bit. We ended up settling in Arlington, Texas, where my father continued his studies. And then the revolution happened in Iran. And so my parents kind of had to make a decision about whether or not to return. For me, it would not have been a great choice, and I think my parents knew that.
Yeah.
For them, it would not have been a great choice. My father would have probably been asked to join military service.
Yeah.
Because they were about to also embark with the Great War with Iraq. And, an entire generation of Persian men died in that conflict, as did Iraqis as well. It was just a terrible, terrible, violent era. But unfortunately, my parents divorced. We did not return. And my mother and I went to California and traveled a bit to Colorado. And then when it was time for me to go to college, I did not like the cold. I did not like to scrape windows. And I landed in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, and I've not left, except for a few vacations. So I've been traveling around the country. I never went to the same school for more than 2 years. And so that really informed a lot of how I look at life and how I've raised my own child. And but it was a it was a good childhood, you know.
None of them are
Not
perfect, but
well,
whatever doesn't break us makes us stronger. And
yeah, yeah. One of these days, I'm going to talk a little bit more outside of my professional life about what it feels like to be a child of immigrants.
well, that was going to be my next question.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm happy to talk about it.
Good, yeah.
First of all, the immigrant spirit is so strong, right? It's about pursuing the American dream in its most ideal fashion, which is that if you work hard, you can dream, you can attain your wildest dreams. It comes with that grit and that determination, everything that's, in my mind, truly American. So there's a lot of value with that, like having a work ethic, perseverance, resilience, all of which really have helped me as an adult in my professional life, in my personal life. But there is a sort of a more difficult side of that, which is that children of immigrants are essentially torn between two worlds, right? Their parents are still firmly in. I mean, they've assimilated. I mean, my parents assimilated. You know, we had hamburgers for dinner. You know, while we were having our kebab. You know, I mean, it was just a variation, but they don't entirely assimilate. You know, they remember their childhoods. They remember their life experiences, faith, culture, food, language. And they're
Did they speak English at home or not?
They did. So my first language is Farsi, but once I got into public school, within 6 months, I was fluent in English. It's just the nature of being a 5-year-old and playing on the playground. You figure it out.
Interesting.
It's a lot harder for, adults to capture that language. So they used me as like a built-in tutor, so they spoke Farsi to me, which they hoped would continue my knowledge and proficiency of the language, but they expected me to speak in English. So to this day, that's exactly the conversation I have with my parents. Really? They speak to me in Farsi and I speak in English. My Farsi is not very good, so maybe that's part of it. But, oh, absolutely. It was a blending. But when you have a Persian culture at home, the decor is Persian. There's Persian rugs everywhere. There's teapots and what are they called? Samovars. And there's rice with every meal, and everybody eats raw onion and radishes. And so that's one part of your life. And then you go spend the night at your friend's house who's American, and they're having meatloaf. And you've never had meatloaf. Oh. It's not what you eat at home. I mean, I didn't have bacon until I was in college.
Really?
Because our
so
family
pork
didn't.
Is just verboten.
Yeah. So I often felt very much like, who was I? What's my identity? Am I an American girl? Which I desperately wanted to be. I was living in Southern California in the 80s. I wanted to be an American girl. Or was I a Persian girl who was living in the United States? And you never quite feel like this is your place. Like you can say, I'm American because of that. I'm not technically first generation. I think that's a distinction because I wasn't born here. But yeah, it was difficult to feel like I could say, like on 4th of July, sing the anthem, because we were technically not citizens, or we were still on student visas. It wasn't it wasn't like I felt like I had the credential.
Okay.
And that kind of went into my college days. And once I became a citizen, that went away. But even to this day, when I got married, for example, it was very difficult for my parents because I didn't have any Persian traditions or anything as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, is also something that immigrant parents worry about with their children, is that they will lose the culture and language of their youth. And quite frankly, it happens a lot. So I don't know how to balance that. I don't know if there's a right way, but I know that it's absolutely tumultuous in your brain when you're a child of immigrants. Is, am I being disloyal to my history and heritage? But I live in this country, and if I don't assimilate, I don't conform, how will I be perceived as a foreigner? Are people going to be afraid? And certainly this country's history with my birth country is not helpful in that regard. So,
is it better now, or was it better and then it got worse again?
Well, I have a different name now too. So when people, when I introduce myself, there's not an immediate, you're a foreigner. Dawn Wallace is as vanilla as
you
it
could be part Hispanic and part whatever. And
yeah. I was just in Portugal, and someone thought I was Greek, and someone thought I was Italian. And I mean, Persian people can recognize other Persian people. It's one of those things.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, so when I was younger and I went by my birth name and my maiden name is Persian, there was a lot of, where are you originally from? And when I became a citizen, you get the opportunity to change your name. So I changed my name to Dawn. It's the English translation of my birth name. And then my birth name is my middle name. And then when I got married, I became a Wallace. And so here I am. Things got okay, and then 9/11 happened.
I bet.
And I think 9/11 started the resurgence of that fear.
Yeah.
And certainly the modern era with the conflict with Israel and with the Arab countries hasn't helped. So I would say that I don't feel so much of that as maybe older immigrants might. And let me say, Lisa, that it depends on where you're immigrating from, what your experience is, right? If you're immigrating from Mexico, there's a certain feeling about you. If you immigrate from Arab countries, there's a fear associated with that. I mean, if you're immigrating from Scotland, no one worries about you.
A,
right?
they can't tell, but B, yeah. Well, you look like us. Welcome.
Yeah. Asians, I think, have a different, this immigrant mentality. So I do think that how society embraces you, I think that in this state, if you are fully assimilated, language, food, everything, I think people are more accepting of you. I would say that being an immigrant in 1975 is a lot different than being an immigrant in 2026.
Okay.
And the notion of the American dream was celebrated and uplifted. And I think now it also has some sort of negative connotations, and it is what it is. But this country has given me every opportunity. I told someone the other day that if I had gone back in 1979, this would not be my life. I would not have gotten an education. I probably would have married against my will. I would not have financial independence. I would not have reproductive independence. I would not have, and these are some of the archaic notions of Muslim law, but if your husband's beating you and you want to get a divorce, you can, but you give up your children at 7 years of age. So there's a lot associated with that culture, the fundamentalist culture that's super negative. So I wouldn't be in an interview with you, Lisa. I think that if a revolution hadn't happened and my parents had gone home, I think I would have had a very different life. Even the wealthy there have a very different life in terms of what women can and cannot do. So
that makes
I'm very grateful.
Sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think Arizona is lucky to have you. Let's take a quick break, and then we're going to talk more about you and Arizona. Another Arizona treasure is the Chapel of the Holy Cross in Oak Creek Canyon. and it was conceived by Marguerite Brunstick Stoud using dramatic architecture nestled in scenic landscape with perfectly framed views. The land was sacred to local tribes for centuries. Visitors come from around the world for the tranquility and the beauty of the space. I can never leave without something from the gift shop, an ornament, a cross, a print. Barry Goldwater helped secure the site. So, Dawn, you have a special experience, and that is that you chose to be an American and an Arizonan. Most of us just kind of started here and thought, okay. And I'm sure everything has a good and bad side, and that must also have a good and bad side. You have one foot in each culture.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, more cultures, but not all. And yeah, it's got to be very different.
Well, it was, because choosing to be an American is not as easy as you think. From when we decided, or my parents decided not to return to Iran, and my father no longer was a student, we essentially became undocumented. And so I spent the majority of my youth and the first year of my college experience as an undocumented person.
Oh, my goodness.
And so it was very difficult for me, for example, to get a job when I was a child, a teenager, because I didn't have a social security card and so forth and so on. Getting into college was a fluke, because back then there were no laws on the books about checking legal status, and you could squirrel your way in. Luckily for me, ASU allowed me to do that. I hope I don't get in trouble post admitting it. But
well, you're a citizen now. So.
Yeah, I am. And so it was really, really, really difficult because, I explained to you that you had a foot in every culture.
Yeah.
Well, most people kind of assimilate once they can become permanent residents or citizens. They can say, well, I'm a citizen, I'm an American. I could never say that. On top of feeling the tension between the two cultures, I could never really assign myself to being a Persian citizen or being a U.S. citizen, or what flag do I raise, right?
Interesting.
So luckily for me, and I share the story with you because it also has defined and informed my life. The fact that I was able to get an education despite all this really set me off for everything and every success I've ever had. And it's the reason I spent 2 decades in education policy, and we can talk about that later. But the reason that I am a citizen today is that my mother met a woman in Colorado where she was living who was sort of a pioneer in social justice, a wonderful woman. She was an attorney. She was an immigration attorney. And someone told her about my mom and I, and the fact that I was struggling, to be able to go to school, and she was struggling. And she took our case. And it just so happened it was around the time that Ronald Reagan was trying to create that master immigration policy for the country, and there was an amnesty period.
Okay.
And
So your mother is American now too.
Yes. Oh, my parents are both American.
Good.
But my father was separate from us, but my mom and I. And so this woman pro bono took our case, pushed us through, got us a green card, got me to the point where I was able to then benefit from financial aid and support.
Terrific.
And I was able to get a job. And then it led me down the road to getting my citizenship. So it's not as easy as people think when you aren't, a celebrity from Canada or, when you're an everyday person. And I mean, I think it's way harder now. I don't want to diminish the experience of modern immigrants and their journey to citizenship, because it's nearly impossible. It's impossible.
Heartbreaking to see what's going on now.
And that's why I've been really open about my experience. I mean, they're called dreamers today. There were dreamers in 1987, and I was one of them.
Yeah.
And so that's one place where I've always sort of pushed when I've worked for electeds, is to think about what it means to be a young person trapped in a country not of your choice, and then looking to your future and seeing how you are going to contribute or not contribute. Because if you don't have a social security card in this country, you cannot work. And if you cannot work, you
Pure
are
and
not
simple.
contributing.
Yeah.
And so, becoming a U.S. citizen, being adopted, and that's what I tell people. I was adopted by this country, and that is a choice that two people make. It's not like, you're born into it and you have no choice. I made a choice. This country made a choice. This country is invested in me. I have worked hard. I spent 20 years in public service. I have lived a fruitful, I've contributed in my community. I've gotten married. I've raised a child. I've done all the things that I think one should do when they are given a gift. And the gift of citizenship is really that. So, I mean, I'll tell you, it absolutely was a defining moment in my life, to be able to then raise the flag of being an American, because up until you get that piece of paper that says you can, you really can't.
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
And so I'm thrilled. I will tell you, I still love my birth culture. We eat Persian food all the time. My parents still speak Farsi. I still have lots of artifacts and heirlooms that have been passed down to me that have Persian influence. But there's no question I'm an American girl. At 56, I'm an American girl. And that's
And
just forever.
it's wonderful to me that you have been in government. I mean, you don't get much more American than that. And you have really been not just a passive American, but an active American.
Well, the service to others is fundamental. I mean, again, I see this as a gift, and service to others is fundamental to my values, just my own personal values. You have to give to others, especially when you're blessed in life, like I have been. But working in service to the community, whether it's in the public sector, whether it's in nonprofit work that I do now, or Lisa, it's that you work in the private sector, but you use the resources and the opportunities of the private sector to support community through philanthropy or through service or through volunteerism. And so I think in every industry, in every employment sector, anything you choose to do, there's a way to leverage the opportunities you have and support the community in which you live and work and raise your children and recreate and do all that other stuff that you do. So, I mean, my government work is I love what I do in the nonprofit sector today, but there's no question that the 2 decades I spent working in service of Arizonans, and I truly felt that. I felt like my bosses ultimately were Arizonans who had elected the people that I worked for. And so by proxy, I worked for them. And so, I did 20 years of education work. It was always, who do I report to? Who do they report to? They're, Arizonans. And then who am I working on behalf of? And that's the children of Arizona. And their right to have the education that completely altered the trajectory of my life. And quite frankly, altered the trajectory of my child's life, which I feel is ultimately my legacy, is how have I brought another human being into the world that's going to continue this pursuit of service to others.
That is a perfect place to end. And thank you for that. And thank you for all of this. I so appreciate your perspective. I really do.
Thank you, Lisa. It's always fun to be able to talk about how you've gotten somewhere.
Yeah.
When you're sitting in your chair, you often are very present. But when you talk to someone and they ask you to talk about your life, you start to realize, well, yeah, I was really affected and impacted by that. Who I am today is very much about how I was raised and the ideas that I was raised with and the expectations that existed. And I shared with you a few stories about people who took care of us, who didn't have to take care. If those people had not crossed our paths, if that educator had not told me to apply for a college in Tempe, Arizona, what would I be today? If the lawyer had not helped me get citizenship, where would I be today? If I hadn't gotten my first job in government, where would I be today? All of these are great things to occasionally recollect and reaffirm in your own value system about who you want to be and what your identity is and how you contribute to the world. So thank you for that. That was a blessing on a Sunday morning.
Thank you for sharing it.
All right.
Okay.
We'd really like to hear from you about anything this show led you to think about. Write to us at celebratingaz.com. The wizard behind making a conversation into a podcast is Tom Heidinger. The music comes from Daniel Blattney. And I'm Dana Cooper.